Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I stand before you to discuss a matter of critical importance to millions of immigrants across the United States, a sweeping change to how our government tracks and monitors the travel of green card holders and visa holders. This change takes effect on December 26, 2025, just days from now, and it will fundamentally alter the border crossing experience for nearly every non-citizen entering or leaving our country. Today, I want to walk you through what's happening, why it matters, who will be affected, and most importantly, what you need to do to protect yourself and your loved ones. What is actually changing? Let me start with the facts. On December 26, 2025, the Department of Homeland Security will implement a new biometric tracking system that requires all non-U.S. citizens, including lawful permanent residents commonly known as green card holders, to be photographed using facial recognition technology every single time they enter or exit the United States. Let me repeat that for emphasis. Every time you cross the border, whether at an airport, seaport, or land crossing, your photograph will be captured, your face will be scanned, and that biometric data will be stored in federal databases that can retain your information for up to 75 years. This is not a pilot program. This is not optional. This is not limited to certain categories of travelers. According to information published by U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and detailed in Federal Register notices from October 2025, this system will be mandatory at commercial airports, seaports, and major land crossings throughout the United States. The technology being deployed is called the Traveler Verification Service, or TVs, which uses facial recognition cameras to compare your live photograph with existing images held by the Department of Homeland Security, the State Department, and Customs and Border Protection. These systems will generate galleries of biometric images associated with each individual traveler and use sophisticated algorithms to verify identity at both entry and exit points. For those of you who have traveled internationally in recent years, you may have encountered facial recognition at certain airports. You may have thought it was voluntary or temporary. Let me be clear, what's happening on December 26th makes this system comprehensive, mandatory, and permanent for all non-citizens. The historical context, how we got here. To understand the significance of this moment, we need to look back. The push for biometric entry-exit tracking didn't start yesterday. In fact, Congress first mandated such a system back in 1996 through the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act, known as IRIRA. After the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, the 9/11 Commission report reinforced this requirement, calling for enhanced border security measures. But for nearly 3 decades, implementation remained incomplete. Various administrations launched pilot programs, some at 50 airports, some at selected seaports, but none achieved the comprehensive nationwide scope that this new rule represents. Why now? The Department of Homeland Security justifies this expansion by pointing to several key concerns. According to a 2023 Congressional Research Service report, approximately 42% of undocumented immigrants in the United States entered legally but overstayed their visas. Without a reliable system to track exits, the government has struggled to identify who stays beyond their authorized period. Additionally, DHS claims this technology helps combat identity fraud, prevents the use of fake passports, and strengthens national security screening. According to CBP data from 2024, their facial recognition system has already processed over 300 million travelers and helped identify more than 1,800 individuals using fraudulent documents or false identities. The system's expansion has been accelerated under the current administration's focus on immigration enforcement, with officials framing this as a necessary tool to modernize border management and satisfy long-standing congressional mandates. Who will be affected? Now let me address the question that's probably foremost in your minds. Who exactly does this affect? The answer is straightforward but sobering. Virtually every non-U.S. citizen. Let me break this down by category. Green card holders. If you are a lawful permanent resident of the United States, you are covered by this rule. It doesn't matter if you've lived here for 5 years or 50 years. It doesn't matter if you're a conditional green card holder waiting on your Form I-751% approval. It doesn't matter if you travel once a year or once a month. Every time you leave the United States and every time you return, you will be photographed and biometrically tracked. This represents a significant shift in how green card holders have historically been treated at the border. For decades, permanent residents were considered returning residents and given streamlined processing. This new system effectively places you in the same monitoring category as temporary visitors, tourists, and short-term visa holders. Visa holders. If you're in the United States on any type of non-immigrant visa, H-1B workers, L-1. Transferees, F-1 students, J-1 exchange visitors, B-1, B-2 tourists and business travelers, U, are fully subject to this requirement. Exit tracking will create comprehensive records of your departures, which could affect future applications, visa renewals, and adjustment of status proceedings. Refugees and asylees, individuals who have been granted asylum or refugee status in the United States, are also covered. When you re-enter or depart, you will undergo the same biometric verification as all other non-citizens. Children. One question I hear frequently is whether minors are exempt. The answer is mostly no. While the Department of Homeland Security states it may waive the requirement for children under 14 if it's not technically feasible, in practice, most children will be photographed. There is no blanket exemption for minors. Who is not affected? The only category of traveler explicitly exempt from this rule is U.S. citizens. If you hold a U.S. passport and are a naturalized or native-born citizen, you are not required to participate in biometric exit tracking. However, even U.S. citizens may have their photos taken voluntarily for boarding efficiency at certain airports. Additionally, certain diplomatic travelers and crew members may receive case-by-case waivers depending on international agreements, but these exceptions are narrow and not available to the general traveling public. Let me put this in perspective. According to the Office of Homeland Security statistics, there were approximately 12.8 million green card holders living in the United States as of January 1, 2024. Add to that the millions of temporary visa holders, and you're looking at a system that will affect tens of millions of people every year. How the system actually works. Let me walk you through what you can expect when you travel under this new system. At departure, when you check I for an international flight or approach a port of exit, you will be directed to stand in front of a facial recognition camera. You'll be asked to remove hats, masks, and glasses. The camera will capture your image, which typically takes less than 2 seconds. That live photograph is then instantly compared against galleries of photos already in government databases. Your visa application photo, your green card photo, your passport photo, and any previous entry or exit photos. The system confirms your identity and records your departure. Unlike the old system where passport stamps served as proof of exit, this is now fully automated and digitized. You may see a confirmation screen, but in many cases, the process happens so quickly you may not even realize it's complete. At arrival, when you return to the United States, you'll go through the same process. As you approach the customs checkpoint, facial recognition cameras will capture your image and verify your identity before you even speak to a border officer. The system checks for any red flags, outstanding warrants, visa violations, immigration holds, or security concerns. If everything matches and clears, you proceed normally. But if there's a discrepancy, perhaps the system can't match your face accurately, or there's a question about your travel history, you'll be sent to secondary inspection for manual verification. Border crossings, for those who travel frequently between the United States and Canada or Mexico, this system will be implemented at major land crossings as well. CBP has indicated that the Detroit-Windsor crossing, the Buffalo-Niagara crossing, and major Texas and Arizona border stations will all be equipped with this technology. If you're a green card holder who lives near the border and crosses regularly for work or family reasons, you should expect significant changes to your crossing experience. Technical implementation. The technology being used is sophisticated but not infallible. Studies have shown that facial recognition systems have higher error rates for certain demographics, particularly individuals with darker skin tones, women, and elderly travelers. These accuracy problems are not theoretical. They're documented in research from organizations including MIT and Georgetown University. If the system fails to match your face, if there is an error in the database, or if you have a common name that triggers false matches, you could face delays, secondary inspection, or in worst-case scenarios, denial of boarding or entry. This is why it's critical to monitor your travel records carefully, which I'll discuss shortly. Privacy concerns and civil liberties. Now let me address the elephant in the room: privacy. The expansion of biometric tracking has sparked fierce debate among civil liberties organizations, privacy advocates, and immigration rights groups. Organizations including the Electronic Frontier Foundation and the American Civil Liberties Union have raised serious concerns about this system. Let me outline their primary objections. Mass surveillance. Critics argue that this system represents an unprecedented expansion of government surveillance over immigrants and foreign visitors. Millions of biometric images will be collected, stored, and potentially shared with other agencies. The Department of Homeland Security has indicated it will share this data with U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services for identity verification, with Immigration and Customs Enforcement for enforcement purposes, and with the FBI for criminal background checks. According to DHS's own documentation, biometric data collected from non-citizens can be retained for up to 75 years. Think about what that means. If you're a 30-year-old green card holder today, your facial biometric data could remain in federal databases until you're 105 years old. Your children, perhaps even your grandchildren, could still have your biometric information accessible to government agencies long after you were gone. Accuracy and discrimination. As I mentioned earlier, facial recognition technology is not equally accurate for all people. Multiple studies have demonstrated that these systems have higher error rates when identifying Black individuals, women, and people from certain ethnic backgrounds. This isn't just an inconvenience, it's a civil rights issue with real-world consequences. If you're misidentified, if your face doesn't match properly, if the system flags you incorrectly, you could miss your flight, face secondary inspection, be delayed for hours, or even be denied entry to your own home where you have lawful permanent residence. For people of color and other marginalized communities, this technological bias adds another layer of discrimination to an immigration system already fraught with inequities. Data security. What happens if this massive database is hacked? What happens if foreign governments request access to this information? What happens if private companies gain access through data breaches or government partnerships? These are not hypothetical questions. We live in an era of massive data breaches affecting millions of Americans every year. Consent and coercion. Here's perhaps the most troubling aspect. You cannot opt out. If you're a non-citizen and you refuse to be photographed, CBP can deny you boarding, deny you entry, or refuse to verify your departure. For green card holders who have built lives in this country, who have jobs, homes, families, businesses, the threat of being denied re-entry is not just inconvenient, it's existentially threatening. DHS claims that U.S. citizens' photos, if inadvertently captured, will be deleted within 12 hours. But there is no such deletion policy for non-citizens. Your data is permanent. Privacy advocates have expressed concerns that this policy normalizes mass surveillance and could set a precedent for even broader tracking systems in the future. If the government can mandate facial recognition for all non-citizens, what stops future administrations from expanding such systems to citizens? What stops state governments from implementing similar tracking? What stops employers or landlords from demanding biometric verification? These questions matter because immigration policy often serves as a testing ground for surveillance technologies that later expand to the broader population. Impact on naturalization and immigration benefits. Let me turn now to a practical concern that affects many of you. How will this system impact your future immigration applications, particularly naturalization? If you're a green card holder working toward U.S. citizenship, you know that Form N-400, the application for naturalization, requires you to document your physical presence in the United States. Specifically, you must demonstrate that you've been physically present for at least half of the required residency period. Typically 30 months out of the 5 years before applying, or 18 months out of 3 years if you're married to a U.S. citizen. Under the old system, proving physical presence relied primarily on self-reported travel dates, passport stamps, and sometimes airline tickets or other documentation. Border officers didn't always stamp passports, especially for lawful permanent residents, which meant some travel history was essentially on the honor system. This new biometric exit system changes everything. Now every departure will be recorded with precision. Every entry will be documented. The government will have a comprehensive Timestamped, biometric record of your travel history. On one hand, this could simplify naturalization applications. You'll have access to a complete I-94 travel history through the CBP website, which you can print and submit with your application. No more digging through old passports or trying to remember exact dates from years ago. But there's a darker side. Any discrepancy between your reported travel and the government's records could raise red flags. If you forgot about a weekend trip to Canada 5 years ago, if you miscalculated your time abroad by a few days, if there's a technical error in the system that shows a departure without a corresponding entry, USCIS could delay your application, request additional evidence, or even deny your petition. Immigration attorney Ava Bailey, quoted in recent reporting, noted that this system creates a more comprehensive travel record that may affect naturalization eligibility, raise questions about possible abandonment of permanent residency, and subject applicants to increased scrutiny. For those of you planning to apply for citizenship in the coming years, I cannot stress this enough. Meticulously monitor your travel records. After every trip, log into the I-94 website, i94.cbpdhs.gov, and verify that your entry and exit were properly recorded. Download and save those records. If there's an error, report it immediately through the DHS Traveler Redress Inquiry Program known as TRIP. Inconsistent travel records could delay your naturalization application by months or even years. Don't let a technical glitch destroy your dream of becoming a U.S. citizen. Abandonment of residence concerns. This leads me to another critical issue, abandonment of permanent residence. Many green card holders don't fully understand that their status is not absolutely permanent. If you spend too much time outside the United States, if your travel patterns suggest you've made another country your primary residence, immigration authorities can determine that you've abandoned your status. Historically, this determination was somewhat subjective. Border officers would ask questions about your trips, look at passport stamps, and make judgments based on incomplete information. But now, with comprehensive exit tracking, the government has precise data about how long you've been outside the United States. If you take multiple extended trips, if you're spending 6 months abroad, and then just popping back for a few weeks, if your biometric records show a pattern of minimal time in the U.S., you could receive a notice alleging abandonment of residence when you try to re-enter. Let me be clear about the law. There's no bright-line rule that says if you're gone X days, you lose your status. But immigration officers are trained to look for red flags. Generally speaking, trips longer than 6 months trigger scrutiny. Trips longer than 1 year almost always result in questioning and potentially a finding of abandonment unless you obtained a re-entry permit before leaving. If you're planning to spend significant time abroad, perhaps caring for an elderly parent, completing a work assignment, or pursuing education, you must plan ahead. File Form I-131, Application for Travel Document, to obtain a re-entry permit before you leave. This permit allows you to be outside the United States for up to 2 years without abandoning your status. Here's what many people don't realize. The biometric exit system makes it much harder to argue that you didn't understand the rules, or that your travel wasn't really that extensive. The government will have time-stamped photographic evidence of every departure and entry. Your personal recollection won't matter. The data will speak for itself. And here's the kicker, if you're den. Renationally, for those who live near the Canadian border and frequently cross for business or family reasons, the impact will be even more pronounced. The Detroit-Windsor crossing, which serves many Ohio residents, will be fully equipped with exit tracking technology. If you're commuting across the border or making regular trips to Toronto, you'll be photographed and tracked every single time. Additionally, if you're planning to apply for naturalization through the Cleveland or Columbus USCIS field offices, be aware that officers there will have full access to your biometric travel history when reviewing your Form N-400. Make sure your records are accurate before you apply. What you must do now, practical action steps. Let me now provide you with concrete steps you must take to protect yourself under this new system. Step 1. Verify your documents before your next international trip. Check the expiration date on your green card. If your Form I-551 expires within the next 6 months, renew it now by filing Form I-90. Border officers will be less forgiving of expired cards under the new system, and biometric mismatches due to outdated photos could trigger secondary inspection. If you have a conditional green card and your Form I-751 to remove conditions is pending, make sure you're carrying evidence of your pending application. CBP officers will verify your status through their databases, but having documentation prevents delays. Step 2. Monitor your I-94 records after every international trip. Visit the CBP I-94 website within a few days and verify that both your departure and entry were properly recorded. Download the records as PDF files and save them in a secure folder organized by date. These records will be essential if you apply for naturalization, if you're questioned about your travel history, or if you need to contest an error. If you notice a discrepancy, perhaps a departure wasn't recorded, or an entry shows the wrong date, file a correction request immediately through the DHS Traveler Redress Inquiry Program at tripdhs.gov. Don't wait. Errors in the system can compound over time and create serious problems down the road. Step 3. Prepare for border questioning. Under the new system, border officers may ask more detailed questions about your travel patterns, especially if your biometric records show frequent or lengthy departures. Be prepared to explain the purpose of your trips, provide evidence of your continued residence in the United States, and demonstrate ties to the country. Keep documentation readily available: lease agreements, employment letters, tax returns, children's school enrollment records, utility bills, bank statements. These documents prove that you maintain a primary residence in the United States despite your travel. Step 4. Understand your re-entry rights if you're planning to be outside the United States for more than 6 months. Seriously consider filing for a re-entry permit before you leave. This is especially important if you're caring for a sick relative abroad, taking an overseas work assignment, or pursuing extended education outside the U.S. A re-entry permit costs $660, requires biometric capture, fingerprinting, in the United States before you leave, and takes several months to process. Plan ahead. Don't wait until the last minute. Step 5. At the airport or port of entry when you travel, cooperate fully with the facial recognition process. Remove hats, scarves, glasses, and masks when instructed. Look directly at the camera. The capture takes only seconds, and resistance will only create problems. If the system fails to match your face, don't panic. You'll be directed to a border officer for manual verification. Be polite, provide your documents, and answer questions truthfully. In most cases, secondary inspection resolves quickly once officers manually confirm your identity. Step 6. Keep a personal travel log. Even though the government is tracking your travel biometrically, maintain your own detailed log. Note the date of every departure, the date of every return, the purpose of your trip, and the duration. Include flight numbers, hotel confirmations, and any other documentation that proves where you were and why. Why is this important? Because if you ever need to contest an immigration decision, if you apply for naturalization, or if you face questions about abandonment of residence, your personal records provide a second layer of verification. Don't rely solely on government databases, which can contain errors. Step 7. Consult with legal counsel if you have any concerns about your travel history, if you've spent significant time abroad, if you're unsure whether your trips might trigger abandonment concerns, if you're planning extended travel in the future, or if you're preparing to apply for naturalization. Consult with an experienced immigration attorney now. Don't wait until you're denied entry at the border. Don't wait until USCIS raises questions about your naturalization application. Don't wait until you're in crisis mode. Immigration law is complex, and the stakes are too high to navigate alone. Legal challenges and future outlook. Before I conclude, let me address the legal landscape surrounding this rule. While the Department of Homeland Security has finalized and implemented this system, legal challenges are likely forthcoming. Civil liberties organizations have indicated they're considering litigation based on several legal theories. First, they argue that the mass collection and indefinite retention of biometric data may violate Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable searches and seizures. Second, they contend that the discriminatory accuracy of facial recognition technology violates equal protection principles. Third, they argue that the lack of opt-out provisions for lawful permanent residents may exceed DHS's statutory authority. However, courts have historically given the government broad authority over immigration matters and border security. The Supreme Court has recognized that Congress and the executive branch have plenary power over immigration, meaning they have wide discretion that courts are hesitant to limit. Additionally, the legal doctrine of border exceptionalism holds that constitutional protections are more limited at international borders than in the interior of the country. Travelers entering or leaving the United States have diminished privacy expectations, and warrantless searches and surveillance are more easily justified. That said, the scope of this biometric system is unprecedented. No court has specifically ruled on whether comprehensive, permanent, biometric tracking of lawful permanent residents, people who have been granted the right to live permanently in the United States, exceeds constitutional boundaries. If civil liberties groups file suit, we could see years of litigation. In the meantime, the system will remain in place, and millions of immigrants will be subject to its requirements. Looking globally, the United States is not alone in implementing biometric border systems. The European Union is launching its entry-exit system, known as EES, which will similarly track all third-country nationals entering and leaving the Schengen area. The United Kingdom is expanding its digital border scheme with biometric gates and e-visas. Canada has limited pilot programs at airports for pre-clearance travelers. In other words, we're witnessing a global shift toward biometric border management. The question is not whether such MS will exist, but whether they'll be implemented with appropriate safeguards, transparency, and accountability. Conclusion: taking control of your immigration future. Ladies and gentlemen, let me bring us to a close. December 26, 2025, marks a significant turning point in how the United States manages immigrant travel. For the first time in our nation's history, every green card holder, every visa holder, every refugee and asylee will be subject to comprehensive biometric tracking at both entry and exit. This system promises enhanced security, better tracking of visa overstays, and modernized border management. But it also raises profound questions about privacy, civil liberties, technological bias, and government surveillance. As immigrants, or as people who support immigrant communities, we must be clear-eyed about both the opportunities and the risks this system presents. We must be proactive in monitoring our records, protecting our status, and preparing for a future where our movements are tracked with unprecedented precision. But let me end on a note of empowerment. Knowledge is power. By understanding these new rules, by taking the action steps I've outlined today, by working with qualified legal counsel when needed, and by advocating for fair and just implementation, you can protect yourself and your loved ones. This is not a time for panic. This is a time for preparation. This is not a time for passivity. This is a time for vigilance. This is not a time to accept injustice. This is a time to demand accountability from our government and protection for our rights. For those of you who are green card holders working toward citizenship, do not let this system discourage you. Your dream of becoming an American is still achievable, but achieve it with your eyes open, your records accurate, and your rights protected. For those of you who are visa holders, pursue permanent residence. Understand that this system will track your compliance with immigration laws more thoroughly than ever before. Make sure every day you spend in the United States is documented, every trip abroad is recorded, and every requirement is met. For those of you who are immigration advocates, attorneys, community organizers, and allies, this is a moment that demands our attention. We must educate our communities, challenge discriminatory implementation, demand transparency from government agencies, and fight for systems that balance security with justice. The story of American immigration has always been a story of struggle and triumph, of challenges overcome and dreams realized. This new chapter in that story will test us, but if we approach it with knowledge, preparation, and solidarity, we will not merely survive this change. We will ensure it serves justice rather than undermines it. Thank you for your time and attention today. I hope this information empowers you to navigate these new rules with confidence. Remember, you are not alone. Resources are available, legal help is accessible, and communities are ready to support you. Stay informed, stay prepared, stay hopeful, and together we will continue to build the inclusive, just, and welcoming America we all deserve. Thank you.